guys, I miss you, but I'm glad that we are home where we can stay safe and healthy, and I'm just looking forward to getting back to school and seeing you guys all again. But I thought in the meantime that it would be kind of fun to occasionally read a book to you guys, since I don't get to do it to you in class. So the book that I chose today is a book from this old anthology. It's called City Sidewalks, and you can see it's really old. I've had this since I was a little kid. You can see I've even tried to write my name on it a long time ago. It's very loved and very old, and I'm going to read to you one of the stories that is in the book, and it's called Hattie, How Do You Feel? Once there was a girl named Hattie who talked all day long. She was 9 years old, and she had been talking ever since she was a baby. Have you ever heard of a baby in a crib asking her mother for a bib, or telling her mother the bottle was too hot, and would she please cool it off until it was not? Well, Hattie did. At first, Hattie's father and mother were very proud of their daughter. Her mother would push baby Hattie along the street in her baby carriage, and people would turn and stare in surprise to see a mother and her baby talking together like two grown-ups. Nice day, her mother would say. I'll say, said baby Hattie. Bright sun, her mother would say. And that's fun, said baby Hattie. People in the street would stand and stare as baby Hattie's carriage passed. They thought at first that Hattie's mother had a radio in the carriage. When they found out it was baby Hattie, they went home and told their families about the wonderful talking baby. All over town, people said they had never heard a baby talk so much before. Hattie's father and mother smiled proudly. Here you can see Hattie in her crib talking. By the time Hattie was a year old, she could talk for an hour without stopping. I saw a cat. I lost my hat. The mailman's here. I bumped my ear. I want some cookies. I want some cake. I'm so hungry, I'm starting to ache. And as Hattie grew up, she kept talking, faster and faster. But now her mother and father didn't have so much time to listen to her. They began to get headaches from hearing Hattie talking all the day long. They begged and begged her to stop, but she kept right on talking. Hattie's father and mother tried putting bits of cotton in their ears, but they could still hear their talking daughter. So they put earmuffs over the cotton. The earmuffs almost stopped the sound of Hattie's voice, except that her father and mother could still hear a little squeak. So they got some space hats and put those on over the earmuffs. Hattie's father and mother looked a little funny walking around the house in space hats. But anyway, they didn't have to listen to Hattie all the time. Hattie, of course, had to find other people to listen to her, for it's no good talking if no one is listening. Hattie didn't have much trouble at first finding people to talk to. She was very polite. She would go up to people on the street and say, "Hello, how do you feel?" "Why, I feel fine, little girl," they would answer. "How do you feel?" And that was all Hattie needed to start talking. She would take a deep breath, and then she'd tell the person just how she felt about her nose, her toes, the bump on her head, why her finger was red, the black and blue spot on her arm, how she caught a bad cold at a farm, and why she had guessed that her doctor was best. Hattie talked so long that people who stopped to listen to her would be late for school or late for work or late for supper. Whenever Hattie made the mistake of saying, "Hattie, how do you feel?" that person was sure to be late for something. Soon, Hattie was known all over town as the talking girl. People called her, "Hattie, how do you feel?" At first, people thought it was funny to hear a little girl talking so much about her nose, her toes, the bump on her head, why her finger was red. But after a while, Hattie's talking began to make trouble in town. One day, Hattie said, "Hello, how do you feel?" to Mr. Zaleman, the mailman. Mr. Zaleman said, "Fine, thanks. How do you feel?" And that was all he had to say, and Hattie began to talk. She took a deep breath and told about the black and blue spot on her arm, how she caught a bad cold at a farm, and why she had guessed that her doctor was best. Mr. Zaleman, who had a bad cold himself, wanted to hear all about Hattie's bad cold. He stood on the street corner listening to Hattie. Mr. Zalman never noticed that he was standing next to a farmer's truck. He never noticed that there was a hungry goat in the back of the truck. Mr. Zalman never noticed that the goat was eating the letters right out of his mailbag. Hattie talked, and the goat crunched away at the mailman's letters. With Hattie talking, the mailman didn't hear the goat crunching. Besides all the plain letters, the goat ate 9 airmail letters, 20 newspapers, 3 books, and a special delivery letter for a Mr. Arthur Better. Mr. Zalman was so busy listening to Hattie, How Do You Feel, that he didn't see the farmer's truck drive off with a goat full of letters, and nobody in Hattie's town got any mail that day. The school that floated away. Wherever Hattie went, there was trouble. One day, a big pipe broke in the ground floor of the school. A teacher, Miss Reacher, ran into the street to call a plumber. But before Miss Reacher could get a plumber, she ran into Hattie. "Hello, Miss Reacher," said Hattie. "How do you feel?" "I feel fine," said Miss Reacher. And then, without thinking, Miss Reacher asked, "And how do you feel, Hattie?" Hattie, How Do You Feel took a deep breath and began to talk about the bump on her head, why her finger was red, the black and blue spot on her arm, how she caught a bad cold at a farm. Miss Reacher forgot all about the broken pipes, and by the time Hattie had stopped talking, the whole street was flooded and the school had floated away. Now Hattie was in trouble. With everyone's mail getting lost and the school floating away, the town was very upset. There you can see the school. Floating away while she talks her teacher's ear off. I don't know anyone like that. People said something had to be done about Hattie the talking girl. Mr. Sayer, the mayor, called a town meeting at the high school. At the meeting, they made a new rule. The rule was nobody in town was ever to ask Hattie, How Do You Feel, how she felt. If anybody does, the whole town may float away, and nobody will ever get another letter. Poor Hattie. What was she going to do now? Poor Hattie, How Do You Feel, felt terrible. At home, her mother and father had bits of cotton in their ears, and earmuffs over the cotton, and space hats over the earmuffs. On the streets, everyone was afraid to talk to her. And what could be sadder for a talking girl than to have no one to talk to? Then one day, when Hattie was walking down the street talking to herself, 2 robbers named Clobber and Sobber drove into town. The robbers drove up to the town bank, and Clobber said to Sobber, "I'll go in and rob the bank, and you sit here in the car. When I've got the money, I'll whistle 3 times. When you hear me whistle, start the car at once so we can make a quick getaway." As Sobber the robber waited in the car for Clobber to whistle, along came Hattie, How Do You Feel? "Hello," said Hattie to the robber in the car. "How do you feel?" "I feel fine," said Sobber. He didn't want Hattie to know how terribly afraid he was while he waited for Clobber to rob the bank. "And how do you feel, little girl?" So what do you think is going to happen? Let's see if you're right. Hattie smiled at the robber and took a deep breath and began to talk about her nose, her toes, the bump on her head, why her finger was red, the black and blue spot on her arm, how she caught a bad cold at a farm, and why she had guessed that her doctor was best. With Hattie talking, Sobber never heard Clobber's whistle from inside the bank. When Clobber came running out with all the bank's money, Sobber hadn't started the car, and before he could start it, Mr. Quank, from the bank, had time to run out and get Mr. Reisman, the policeman, and Mr. Reisman had time to run and catch the robbers. That night, another meeting was held at the high school. Mr. Sayer, the mayor, stood up and said, "Will Hattie please come up to the front of the room? Hattie, here is a gold shining medal. If you hadn't been in the right place at the right time, and if you hadn't talked, we would never have caught the robbers." Hattie's mother and father were very proud of her. They took off their space hats and earmuffs and took the cotton out of their ears so they could hear what the mayor was saying about their talking girl. "Hattie," said the mayor after he had given her the medal And after everyone had stopped cheering, would you like to say a few words? How does it feel to get a gold shining medal? But with the whole town looking at her, Hattie, how do you feel? Couldn't think of a thing to say except for, fine. And that's the end. Well, guys, I hope you've enjoyed the story, and I hope to hear from you guys soon. Remember, you can always email me or send me a Google Doc anytime. I'd love to see your faces and to hear how things are going. But until the next time, I'll see you later. Bye, guys.